Hey everyone, I'm Dakota,
And I'm Val.
and you're listening to
That's just it.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
How
Hello.
are, how are we all doing today?
Good. I was hoping Rachelle would continue the trend and say good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen,
No,
but
I
it's always got to be that one person.
It was perfect. It was perfect. Welcome to episode 24.
24.
Oh,
I think that's
wow.
correct.
Yeah. Yeah, you did it. That was nice. Dakota, what are we talking about today?
We are going to talk about a part two of our conversation that we had last time with Rachelle.
Mhm.
We're going to talk about retail again, but we're going to delve a little bit deeper into what it means to be a good and effective leader / manager. I think we've all been in positions where, what are you smiling at me
The
for?
word of the day, delve.
I've honestly never used that before today, but it fits perfectly. So
Is
we are
it-
going to
yeah.
delve. No, it's
Dive
like
or delve? Is it?
divulge.
No,
Is
I think
delve a
that's
word?
Delve
I-
is word, yeah.
okay.
Like dive in, like yeah.
Delve.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we are going to delve into what it means to be an effective leader, supervisor, manager. We all have experience in that kind of field,
Mhm.
whether it be in our previous jobs or our current jobs. I feel like my chair is squeaking a lot. So yeah, we're going to talk about that. But first, Rachelle, welcome back. We're glad to
Yes.
have you back.
Thank you for joining us again.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I thought you were just going to stare and say nothing. For those,
The internet's a little bit funky, so
okay. Well, we'll power through it. I think it'll work.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, how you know me?
yeah. So right now I'm a student in radiation therapy. So that's mainly what I do every day of my life. And I am like a retail extraordinaire, I think, just many years of part-time jobs and being a supervisor or a part-time manager, things like that, in a variety of different places. And then, of course, I met Dakota a couple years ago when we worked a retail job together, and then we bonded over trauma. And that is, why I'm here.
And here we are. We're excited to have you. One thing I wanted to talk about quick before we get into the horrible
bosses.
Horrible bosses. How is the lockdown treating you, Rachelle? You live in Toronto, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's probably
the
a bit of a
hotspot.
different experience. Are you like allowed to leave your house or what?
Yeah, so we can I go on walks. That's mainly how the only time I leave, I'll go get coffee and that's about it. And I get my groceries delivered to me, so I don't need to go to a grocery store and be around people and touch stuff. So try to avoid contact, especially just because of the area that we're in. It's obviously I'm dead center downtown and it's a huge hotspot. The lockdown is difficult. I think that I'm fortunate that I live in a residence and that I have a lot of friends who are great supports because I can't go visit my family right now. This week I'm on break before the summer semester starts, and the government has put in new protocols, and so we do have a provincial border patrol basically, which means I can't visit my parents because they're just over the border into Quebec, 20 minutes maybe over the border. And honestly, I don't know if I really want to because I'm coming from a hot spot and they're in a cold spot. So I don't really want to do that. So it's very isolating. So I'm really happy that my friends are at least here. And so we go for walks and stuff.
Can I ask a question too?
Yes.
Radiation therapy, what is that? It's you're not going for X-ray tech, right? That's not the same thing.
No. And we hate when we get confused with the X-ray techs. Is
yes.
Yeah, there's two things we get confused with. They get confused with X-ray techs and we're like, you don't associate me because that's just the vibe here. And X-ray techs don't want to be associated with us, and it's really funny.
Okay.
Or we get confused with radiologists, which is actually a doctor, a medical degree. And
Got it.
so an X-ray tech would take X-ray images or CT images, and then a radiologist looks at those and then like diagnoses what it is. And so that's their whole job. A radiation therapist is more to do with oncology. So if you're a patient with cancer and your oncologist has determined that radiation is a route that you're going to take in terms of your treatment, so you can get surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, or targeted treatment, or a combination of a bunch of them. And so usually you get a combination with like radiation, chemo, and surgery is the main three things. And so if you go for radiation, then I'm like a part of your kind of whole radiation process. So I go to like the CT simulation with you, where we simulate the treatment and take CT images. I look at those CT images, and then I help plan the treatment, which is like a lot of what we call dosimetry. And it's like the physics of the radiation and the dose to the target, and trying to avoid as much of the organs as possible. So I'm part of that whole treatment planning process. And then I'm like the actual person that would set you up every single day in the treatment unit and like press the button to give you the treatment, which only like a certain designated amount of people are allowed to do. And that's kind of why we're classified under a nuclear energy worker because of that.
That is so cool. So then, and you would also be, I'll say like a pretty big emotional support for those people at that time, because especially given COVID, say they're only allowed to go in there on their own. You're the familiar face. You're explaining what's going on. Like you're not just the technical side. You're so much more than that.
Yeah, and that's what really kind of separates us from like the tech positions of like a rad tech, which is someone who only sees you once. They'll come and like take an image of your leg that you may have broken, right? And then they'll never see you again. And for radiation therapy, you'll come for like 5-6+ weeks at a time, and you'll see them every single day, because part of radiation, you need to come every day at the same time every day. It's part of like the cellular biological process of radiation, that it's the same time every single day. And so that's the nice thing. So we see them throughout the whole process, and you get to build really unique connections with those patients. And then you also get to help them with side effects. That's a huge part of our job, is to do like patient interviews, assess the side effects you're experiencing, and then come up with like a care plan with management strategies. Especially if you have like a head and neck cancer, the side effects of radiation itself can be like really hard. So that's like a huge portion of it as well.
That is so cool. Thank you for sharing that. And your schooling, like how many years have you been in school, and how many years do you have to go?
So it's kind of like an accelerated, I would classify it as a bit of an accelerated program. Things happen really quickly, and you don't have any breaks. You have a summer semester as well. So there's no like summer breaks going on. And you normally, for this program, you need at least 1 year of university before you come in. I happen to have a whole degree before I ended up choosing this program. And a lot of people are like more mature students, but you only need it 1 year. And then it's a 3-year program through Michener/U of T. And then I'm just finished my 2nd year. So I'm just going into the summer semester, going to do some clinical simulation for 2 months. And then I start my actual clinical placement in July. And then that goes for like a 9-month stretch. And that's basically all 3rd year is just clinical placement. And then you have to write the certification like exam at the end. It's like the licensing exam. It's like the big one. And then you can work as an actual therapist at that point.
Do you want to work in Toronto, or do you want to, like,
no.
Does it matter to you where you end up? Okay.
Maybe eventually, but I didn't want to. Princess Margaret is like the main one here. It's like a big cancer center, and they have a lot of LINACs, which are linear accelerators, which are used for radiation. So they treat a lot of people here, but it's quite busy and hectic. And I kind of, at least to start, I want to go a little bit slower and like really get the feel for it, and not have like, you know, patient after patient with no breaks and just being super busy, hectic kind of environment.
Burnout would be super easy there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this may be like a silly question, but is there a risk for you always being around the radiation, and or like you're wearing protective? I don't know. I don't know any of the scientific things, but are you obviously out of the room at that point?
Yeah. So this actually gets brought up a lot. It's very limited exposure to any excess radiation, I would say, because when we do deliver, we are outside in the control room, and the patient's radiation itself is extremely precise to the location that's necessary, and no one else can be in the room during that time. So it's really the patient's receiving the full dose, and we receive like basically zero. And we also always wear what's called a dosimeter, and it looks like this little like plastic kind of badgy thing, and you wear it on your lab coat or your scrubs, and that will monitor how much dose that you're receiving. And then if it's ever at a weird amount that is causing alarms, like they do, I don't know if it's monthly or annual assessments, and then they'll let you know. They'll be like, that's way too much radiation, and then they'll like kick you out. But you should never ever reach an amount that's dangerous ever if you're following all protocols. So
Wow.
it's good.
Okay, cool. That is really cool. That's okay.
That was a lot of information. I understood about 50% of those words, so that was, I'm pretty proud of myself for that.
Yeah, if we want a radiation episode, we can do that at some point.
Yes, but I think, and it's concerning and maybe sad, but you'll be so much more needed with the rate that cancer is showing up in people with, like, before we're making lifestyle changes, I'll say, like, cancer, it's a big thing. And even if you're a super healthy person, it doesn't mean you can't get it. So your profession and you as a support, especially during these times when you can't bring your friends or your family in with you, it's huge. So very cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Very neat.
I'm excited.
Neat. Yes.
Okay, we are going to super jump conversations here and switch to a little bit more positivity. Not that Rachelle isn't positive and doing God's work, but you know what I'm saying. So talking about effective leaders and bad leaders, I thought we'd talk about or start with the positive side of it, because I like to stay positive, and then we can kind of dig into the negatives and the bad leaders. So I thought we would all just tell a story about our favorite or our most effective manager or supervisor that we've had in the past, and kind of talk about what made them an effective leader and what made them an effective supervisor. Rachelle, for my story, I have discluded you because I didn't want to be that kind of person who just picked you as my favorite supervisor.
Well, now I'm upset.
I'm sure you picked me.
Like my story.
Yeah. Rachelle, did you want to go first and tell us about your favorite?
Yeah, sure.
Take it away.
So yeah, I worked at this hospital called Baycrest. If you're in the Toronto region, that you may have heard of it. It's like a geriatric center, and it's also a research center. So I was in the research department. It was for a placement I was doing for my last degree, and my boss there was just he made the environment very positive and comfortable. And I really found that he was super encouraging to everything that I did. And one of the main things was that if I was working hard, like, he acknowledged the work that I did. And that was really important for me because I felt like what I was doing was important and my work was valued. And I find that's a really big, important aspect of any kind of work environment. If it's not being acknowledged, then you're less inclined to even work any harder than you already are, or less so. And the other thing was that the way that he built our relationship, he never talked down to me. He always kind of talked to me like I was a peer, which was a really important thing for me, especially because I was only a student on a placement for 8 months. So that made all the difference in the world. And because of the way that he spoke to me and the respect that he gave me, it made me very comfortable to come to him when I needed help. Or if there was, like, at one point, I thought I had made a mistake in the database, and I was like so anxious about it, but I felt comfortable enough to go to him and talk to him about it. And, that mistake is now avoided in the future because he created that environment that allowed me to do so. And so I think that those kind of characteristics really made that a really positive place for me to work. And additionally, he also always went out of his way to find opportunities so I could learn more. So when I told him kind of what I was interested in doing past my degree, he set me up with the doctors there in certain situations and, like, things I can kind of sit in on and, like, listen to on the side to help my learning. And he always gave me those opportunities, even if it was not at all to do with my job. He was like, well, you're interested in this thing when you graduate, so let me put you in contact with people that, this is relevant for. And so all those things, yeah, it was a great experience. I definitely love that job, particularly because of him.
Nice. I completely agree. It's super important for leaders and managers and supervisors. And I need to just pick one word instead of saying all three of them every time. But, I'm just trying to. Anyways, I think it's super important to build those relationships with their, employees or their coworkers. But I also think there's that fine line between, becoming too much of a friend and less of a leader. Speaking from experience for myself, when I was a manager at the movie theater, when I first started, I'm going to throw myself under the bus here a little bit.
Too much of a friend.
Yeah, I was definitely too much of a friend. I was too young. So I was 17 or 18 when I first got as an assistant manager. And I had worked as an employee there for so long. And everyone there was, like, so close. We all hung out every weekend and stuff like that. So that transition from employee to supervisor manager, leader. I say all three again. Was a difficult one for me. And I know that I didn't do it as effectively as I could have when I first started, because I didn't distinguish between, that friendship and that supervisor role. For example, my general manager always said, like, try to avoid hanging out with like new staff outside of work, or like, going to parties with staff and stuff like that, because, you're 18, you're going to get drunk and make a fool of yourself as a person in university. So I know that affected my leadership skills. And I know there was, people who saw me as more of a friend and less of a leader, but I think I did an effective job at turning that around once I kind of started taking it a little more seriously. And was able to build those relationships so that, we still did have a positive relationship and we still could be friends and hang out outside of work. But I also still got things done, which was nice. And that leads me into my favorite manager that I've ever had, which was also at the theater. The general manager, I won't shout out his name because he's a private person, but he, much like Rachelle, he was really good at building relationships and making you feel like, what's the word? Making you feel like you were important and seen. Yeah. And making you feel like your job was needed and that you were an effective employee, as opposed to just, another wheel in the
system. Yeah.
In the system.
Gear in the system, wheel in the system. Yeah.
And nobody's perfect. He definitely had flaws, like everyone does. But the positives definitely outweighed the negatives. And I think I've kind of had a bad run at having managers in my teenage and early 20 years. So that's maybe why he's my favorite one. But yeah, 10 out of 10, really liked him.
The shining star.
The shining star, if you will.
But I think it's good to have experience with both sides, like a good and a bad manager. Like, I think it is good to see the contrast. Were you done? Or do you have more to
take
share?
it away.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Mine is more general. I feel like there was some bad ones, and I know we're staying positive, but I would say the managers that saw you and recognized you, Rachelle, as you were saying, whether that was like words of affirmation or rewards, like you got a raise, like however it looks, that they figured out that's what, I hate the word turned you on, but like that's what got you going, like that's what got you like striving for more. Was it a day off? Was it I don't know, like they used to have different like communication books. So like, did they write you a note because they knew like that would like fill your cup? That's better than turn you on. I like that way better.
I liked it, the other one, but anyways.
So I think it was the leaders that knew that not everyone say that the whole staff did really good and they got everyone a $5 Tim's card. Some people are really excited about that, but some people are like, okay, like that's like, they would much rather that manager stopping them and saying, hey, you did really good. Like how people receive that reassurance, I guess. And it's the managers that also knew that different people learn different ways. Like they might have taught you one way, but Dakota would learn, he would need to read it versus see it being done. So the ones that adjusted based on the situation and based on who they were teaching, I thought was always really beneficial, because like a classroom, you like not every kid learns the same, and not every person coming through there learns the same either.
Right. One thing that I'm just going to kind of add on to your story there a little bit. One thing that Cineplex did that I really, really loved and I think was super effective was they had this program called Encore. And managers got an X amount of points a week that they could give the staff. And they would have to write like a little blurb on what they did well. So let's say, they did a great job cleaning, or they got a guest compliment or something like that. Then they would award the staff X amount of points. And then once you collected points, you could go and redeem them for gift cards or like anything. It's basically, they had like their own Amazon, which was really, really good. When I left, I had collected all my points for the entire time I worked there, and I got like $500 in Amazon cards, like
nice
stuff like that. And it was really great. And people like loved getting those shout outs on Encore. Like you worked for those shout outs. You wanted one.
And I think that's like the employee of the month idea, right? Like for some people, they would maybe hate having their picture up on the wall. But for others, that's like, oh, I did it. Like it's a pat on the back.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes them want to, do better and work better. And it's just effective management. So what would you say are the top 3 qualities in a manager that make an effective manager, if you had to pick 3?
I think my number one would just be respect. Like, doesn't matter who that person is and how much experience they have on you. If they're not treating you with basic respect, then I think that is a huge issue. The second would be communication. I think a lot of my, bad managers just lack that entirely. Communication. And then I think just having a positive work environment, which always stems from the management, the supervisor, whoever is in charge. They're the ones that make the environment. So if they're not making a good environment, it will reflect very much so on all the employees.
Right. And I think also like effective communication is the most important thing there, because as we've experienced, too much communication can definitely be a downfall. Which we'll talk about when we get into the negatives a little bit, but there are certainly managers who can over communicate and helicopter manage, if you will.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a fine line there, but yeah, I definitely think the managers create the environment and kind of create the mood at work. I know when I would walk into work as a manager and I had a really bad day, I tried my best to, leave that at the door, but it's not always easy, especially when you're a young 19-year-old who's in university and living his life.
Oh yeah.
But whenever I would walk into work and you could pick up on people's moods. And then if you feel like they're in a bad mood, everyone's mood goes down. Anything to add, Val?
I would say, like Rachelle and Dakota, you guys both hit the nail with the hammer, however that saying is. I would say one is like having an open mind. Like I remember having managers that if you showed them maybe a more efficient way to do something, because it wasn't the way they had done it, they shot it down. And I think it honestly came from a place of insecurity that it wasn't their idea or whatever it was. But it was frustrating because it was like, but if we do it this way, it makes more sense for everyone. I'm not saying your way is wrong. I'm just saying this way is easier or more efficient or saves us money. And so having that open mind that as a leader and as a manager, you don't know it all and you can still open a book and learn something.
Right. And I think it's important too, because employees are the ones, on the floor doing the work. So they often they see better ways to do things. And I've definitely had managers, and I know Rachelle has had managers who just, their ego gets in the way and you can't do anything.
Yeah.
Which segues perfectly into the flip side of our conversation. Let's talk about bad managers and horrible bosses and terrible experiences. Rachelle, do you have any stories that you'd like to start with, or Val?
No, I was going to say, let's start with Rachelle again.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not going to talk about actually the manager that me and Dakota had, because I know, but there has been others, and I thought maybe you would probably talk about it too a bit. And we beat that horse pretty bad in the last one, but this manager I was working an after school program for the Boys and Girls Club. And I think what really got me about this manager is looking back now, I was like quite a vulnerable employee because I was so young. I was like working when I was like 16, 17, 18. And looking back, I was like very, very young to be kind of dealing with the problems that I was dealing with the manager. And I didn't have enough experience or confidence in order to like solve any of those issues. And basically, she just had a lot of the opposite characteristics of the good manager I described. So she talked down to me a lot. I didn't feel like she respected me at all. And I think that she used her age on me as like means of thinking that she could treat me like that. And that just kind of led to a very negative work environment. And there was a bunch of like little kind of passive aggressive things that she would do to me every single day that I worked. And the one thing that was like really poignant and like very much like has stuck in my memory ever since. And it was something my parents actually got a bit involved with, because at one point I was working in the summer camp and I had an interview for another job that I wanted to start. Not even during that time that I was working in summer camp, it like was starting in September after the camp was over. And I was like another part-time job at a different facility that I wanted to get into. And I think it was for another after school program. And so I asked her, because I was working like Monday to Friday and it was like a full day every single day. And I had my own kind of like group of kids that I looked after every day. And I asked her, I just needed 30 minutes off at the very start of the morning. Like I needed to come in maybe 30 minutes late to go to this interview. And I didn't think it was going to be the end of the world. They did have another person that could just watch my kids for me for 30 minutes while I did this interview. And there was no other time that the company could do. And I didn't think it was going to be an issue. And she basically approached it very aggressively. And she just told me, listen, if you want to take that 30 minutes off, then you need to take the entire week off, which made absolutely no sense to me. So she wanted me to literally not come into work Monday through Friday if I wanted to take 30 minutes to go to this interview that wasn't a conflict of interest with the job that I currently had. And I remember just being so young and not understanding and not knowing how to respond to that. I had no idea what to even say. And that was something like I basically was going to shoot $500 down the drain if I took off that whole week. And the other thing that was very interesting, she has no one to cover me for that time. We had very strict amount of staff. So if you were sick for a whole day, it was a huge issue. They had no one to come in unless they called one of the lifeguards to like take over your day. And then it would be a colossal mess. So that would have been insanely hard for her to do if I had said, okay, I'll take the whole week. Like it would have been so bad for her. Did Dakota just pop out?
I think we lost them, but I'm like flabbergasted by this because
yeah.
So what happened then? Your parents got involved and you got your 30 minutes? Oh
yeah, it was just 30 minutes. So at first I was just kind of like, okay, I guess whatever, like this is just something I have to deal with. And then I went home and told my parents and they were like, that's the most outrageous thing I've ever heard in my life. And then they basically convinced me to go to her boss, so one above her. And at some point, and I was like peeing my pants, having to try to go discuss this with someone above her. Like I was terrified. It was a terrible experience, but I did go talk to her and she did have a conversation with my boss and let her know like, that's not acceptable. But at that point, it was honestly a little bit too late and I missed the opportunity to have that interview. So yeah,
that is awful. And I think I experienced maybe not the exact same thing, but something similar with, it was older women. We were at a pizzeria and like, I think it was, again, like their age that they used as some sort of like power trip to think like, okay, like you're young, you won't know, you won't question this. But it was like, why? I don't know. I look now and I'm like, if I were that person, like if that's me at age 50, I hope I'm having the most fun with that group of teenagers. Like you're running a day camp.
Yeah.
Like make it fun.
Exactly. And it should have been fun. It should have been a very fun time. I should have felt supported and it absolutely was not. It's the opposite.
Yeah. So when like right now, are you working right now?
No. So usually I work retail and right now all like retail's closed down. So I don't have a lot of opportunities. And then the other thing is just with school is extremely hectic right now. And then so there's just like, I don't know if I could fit it into my schedule. So, which is the first time I've ever not worked. So it's been a little bit stressful and I do a lot of extracurricular activities involved with the school and I'm in like a lot of committees. So that takes up so much time too.
Yeah. That like you have a full schedule to begin with. So then, like after that, or maybe as you've grown, did you find that when you came across like management that was that negative, or like, did you not tolerate it, or did you did you go to, and that's just it, like at 16 and at any age, who do you go to? And you feel bad going to her boss, but did you find that you were like able to act in your better, like in your best interest more?
I think I realized when I was with the job at Dakota that I hadn't fully grasped how to deal with these situations still. And I still think that I handled the situation with our old boss not that well. And I will say though that at some point I did realize that I needed to do something more than I did when I was at the after school program. So that's why, I ended up quitting that job. Dakota quit about 5 seconds after I did. And, so that was a good step in the right direction because I knew that nothing I would say was going to actually change that situation. So instead I had to take myself out of that situation. But I think now, like knowing the person I am now, even a couple of years later, I think that I'd be a lot more inclined to stick up for myself than I was back then, for sure.
Yes, which is so cool to, I'll say, like self-witness that growth when you're like, wow, like today I would not have taken that, but it's cool to see over time how you've changed and how you've grown.
Exactly. Yeah.
Welcome
Completely
back,
agree.
Dakota. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, you were a big part of that conversation.
Yes, I was. Thank you.
Yeah, so Dakota, I want you to go now and talk about your experience with
Okay,
your
I
manager.
have two quick little stories to talk about before we move on. One being, if you've never worked in a restaurant, you kind of don't know what it's like, but restaurants are like super crazy and hectic.
I did
Always,
not know
especially when
that
it's busy.
until, yes, I waitressed in one and I didn't realize like the level of fierceness. Like it
The
was
level
not,
of wildness always like
yeah,
it's
always.
crazy. It's a high stress environment. But anyways, one of the restaurants that I worked at, I'm not going to point names or anything. The general manager there was just constantly negative, to the point where staff were crying regularly, or avoiding wherever this person was in the restaurant just to avoid interacting with him. And I remember people, like, if you were talking to someone else during a rush, even if you were asking for help or like saying, do you need anything, if he caught you talking in the wrong spot, screamed at. I remember one time we had a new person and it was their first shift by themselves, and they had made the smallest mistake, like brought the wrong drink or rang in the wrong food order or something like that. And he went on for about 5 minutes screaming to get the stupid B word off the floor, stuff like that. And she was crying. Obviously, it was her first shift. Like, imagine that being your first shift by yourself, and that's the
Did no one ever snap on him and just like stand up to him and be like, "You're a piece of"?
all the time.
Really?
But it's just like in the restaurant, like you scream at people, you scream at each other, and you hate each other during the rush, and then afterwards, it's like you forget everything that happened, and you're like best
Did you
friends again.
scream at people?
I didn't scream at people. No, I don't have it in me to scream at people. If I was mad at someone, I would just be like, bye. I just avoid them. Like I'm an avoidant person. But yeah, if anyone ever screamed at me, and people did scream at me or yell at me, and I just, you walk away, you just let them have their moment.
Yes.
But it just created this like environment of toxicity. Is that the word?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
and negativeness.
Yes. Yeah, negativeness. I don't know, but okay.
Toxicity is the word. Yes. So I quit that job pretty early, just like I did with the Playhouse job that we worked together. And my other story is about the Playhouse job. It's just like in general talking about how we touched on over communication. I don't know if you touched on this while I was MIA briefly,
No,
but the manager, perfect. The manager there over communicated to the point where you felt like, it was your mom watching you. Like it was nothing to wake up to a good morning text. Yeah. Like every morning I would wake up to a good morning text, like call me as soon as you get into the store, or do this as soon as you get into the store. It's 7 a.m. Like
messes with your mental health when that is the first thing on your mind. Like,
every single day, if you closed, you had to text her a report about what happened. Like 9 times out of 10, if you were closing, you got a phone call while you were trying to close, where you had to say exactly word by word everything that happened that day. So your closes that should take like 5-10 minutes took like 45 to an hour, just because you were on the phone the entire time talking about what happened.
Oh my gosh. Why didn't they come in and work it themselves? Like at that point.
Oh my God. Yeah. At that point, they really should have. And the other thing was like the communication wasn't, it didn't make much sense. Like, because it was always conflicting with each other. You have so much communication, and the communication itself wasn't seamless. And you'd have things she'd say at the beginning of the day that were different at the end of the day, and they always conflicted with each other, and it was very messy.
Which is a really tough thing to follow someone when they give you opposite orders like within 24 hours. I can remember having a manager do that, and now I see that he was going through some stuff in his personal life that was likely the cause of it, like years later. But at the time I was like, this is brutal. Like I just had the whole time redecorating the wall how you wanted it. Anyway. Yes.
Yeah, that sounds like us. Yeah.
Very, very similar. Like the owners were like a married couple with their kid, and like we knew everything about the relationship because they would constantly be fighting in the store or like talking about it. It was just like I was not prepared to be a part of someone's marriage, but I was.
But there you were.
And similarly, that same manager, I remember, this is just a great example of the miscommunication. I had worked there for probably 6 months or so at this point. And then there was another girl who had worked there, and I won't say her name, but she was trained on a specific station, and she had actually helped train me on that station prior to, and she had worked mainly that station for like the whole time I worked there. And then I heard from a new manager that person was not trained on that station. I almost said the name. The manager had told this new manager that employee was not trained on that station and shouldn't be on that station. And then that new manager, this is getting so confusing. Anyways, just straight up lied about
just lies.
the training. Just constant lies. Things like that.
Yeah. I can remember that one.
So weird.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that the lying was weird because specifically that lie was very easily refutable. Like we had evidence that she had been working that station for months, so it was like, why? Yeah, it was very weird.
Yeah, it's super odd when people like don't get creative when they're gonna tell a lie. And you're like, oh wow, that's weird. Do you like that? Yeah. To figure
especially when you're working with like a bunch of young people who are obviously friends and who all talk and who all compare notes, and we're like, hello, like this makes no sense.
I mean, you said something too. You said directly, like,
I did.
That's not true. And she was not happy.
I was reading through a text that I had sent to Rachelle right after this, and that manager actually had yelled and said, no, that's not true to me.
Yes.
And then the other manager was like, be nice about this. And I was like, this is just straight up lies and buffoonery.
Oh my God.
From my face.
Buffoonery. Yeah.
It was crazy. Anyways, we're running out of time. So let's just quickly recap the do's and don'ts of being an effective manager. For me, it's honestly just being a good person. If you're respectful to your employees.
Treat people like people.
Exactly. Treat people like people. That's so important. Imagine, you have a Karen come in, but that person is actually your boss. No one wants to work there.
No, and take the time to know your people, like as much as you can. If you're the plant manager of 600, it might be tough, but stop and say hello. Like, be a person. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, respect is honestly the biggest thing that I can say, and that the advice I can give to a manager. Not that I'm a professional manager, but yeah, respect. Become friends with your employees, like they're your employees, but they can still you can still build those relationships.
Be open to learning.
And there's always a way to give constructive feedback without talking down to people. There's always a way to do that.
Yes. And it's like it all takes skills, but I think just part of the battle or part of it is just the leader or the manager just generally trying.
Yes, exactly.
And that goes also for higher up managers. Hire effective managers. Hire good people. Don't hire people who are going to come in.
Yeah, don't hire your buddy. Don't hire him because he's been here for 30 years. Like,
yes.
If we hired based off of heart and soul and personality, now we can't all just go do Rachelle's job because that would be terrifying. But if we hired based off of more core values versus like, well, my buddy needs a job, and yes, 100%.
Anyways, Rachelle, we want to just thank you for coming and joining us today. We're about to get cut off, so I just want to make sure we thank you. And great conversation today, guys, friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have fun in Toronto.
Yes.
Don't get COVID.
Call me if you want to talk radiation, though.
Yeah,
okay.
Seriously.
Sounds good. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.